Well, we were talking a little bit about, Anna, you said something about our theologies being inherently needs-based. Very profound connection there with obviously the addition of the doctrine of original sin, and you use the phrase original goodness through speculating on what theology would look like if it was based on original goodness, which some theologies are, of course. I just think that that's such a profound connection there between how theology and, of course, the way that theology has informed structures of power outside of the church as well through the centuries. How do we shift that? Do we want to shift that, and how do we shift that?
Who wrote that book called Original Blessing?
Matthew Fox.
Yes.
Are you taking a response, or?
Yes.
Oh, you're looking at me.
Well,
I just thought it was a great question.
You don't have to give a solution.
That's right. I wasn't actually really looking anyway because I don't want the implication to be necessary.
Right.
The answers come back.
Yes,
Might be that other people in the room have something to say, but it may also be you have something to say.
I'll defer to the room. It is a great question.
I could say something.
Yeah, please do.
So in my paper, I referred to David Tracy, who's a Roman Catholic theologian in Chicago, and he really helped me to understand this question, because in his book, The Analogical Imagination, he yes.
He's angry with me.
Thank you. He says that he describes from Aquinas onwards the analogy of being, this idea that there is something good in the world that we can work with, and he describes it as a starting point. He says that it's I think, and that might be my critique of Matthew Fox, is that it's just all good. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think it is where we're starting from. For me, our approach to the stranger, if you like, is that there is something we can work with here. Because I know that I work with churches, I know that the churches I work with could fill this room with their problems. I mean, and they all know what the problems are. It doesn't help them at all to articulate those. What really gives them energy is to notice what they're good at. And they all have gifting, because theologically we believe that God has gifted the church with all the gifts that the church needs to be and do what the church is asking them to do. That's a theological axiom of actually being a Christian. And so can we find those things out? And of course, eventually you'll get to, this really isn't working, but it's the starting point. And I take that approach to people, and eventually what tends to happen is the darkness then finds its own place to emerge at the right time, as opposed to the place you're beginning with. So it's a kind of cycle in the end. You're cycling around both of those things. As you said, it's both needs. We're both gifted and needy, and that we're just going to start with the gifting. That's all, because that's an approach to the world that seems, for our day, for our context, to work for us.
And can I just flag up appreciative inquiry and
Yes.
also appreciative church,
Yes.
as methods of that deliberate questioning and to bring out what's positive.
Exactly.
What's good.
And we use that all the time, and it just works because it releases people's energy, as opposed to shaming them, which is what we do most of the time in churches. We spend a lot of time shaming people.
Perhaps that comes back to the language of shoulds that was raised at the start, doesn't it? A friend of mine says oughts and shoulds are not our friends, and how true that is. The link between shame and should, and needs and problem focused thinking, and the idea of the lost world and the fix-it God. These things are a whole worldview that many of us who've had long histories in church very, very, very familiar with, almost to the point of being oblivious to it, but begin to unpick the threads and something far more life-giving, and I would argue far more akin to Jesus, his way of life and being, and a good God kind of begins to emerge, I think.
You know, this business of being perceived to be givers, all of that side of things. I think the words of Paul may be speaking to this situation when he says that we have this treasure in earthen vessels. We're not proclaiming anything out of our own wisdom. We're not doing anything out of our own giftedness. We are just wanting to shovel out what God has, as it were, put in this deformed, strange, misshapen, empty pot. Broken.
Yeah.
And this humility, which was found in Jesus, is so absent in the way which the patterns of ministry in the church seem to work. I think it was probably decades before I heard a preacher in a sermon admit to failure, messing up, or getting it wrong in any way. Yeah, that's it, really.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, Keith.
I just find myself wondering, because it seems to me that everything we say about, not having kind of needs-based concept, it feels so right. On the other hand, I mean, we're bringing something to the party, or one would feel that we kind of, I feel a certain sense that we kind of should be. And I wonder if part of the problem is that, when we get into the church or when we become a Christian, or however you would put it, we take on a kind of system, a kind of, it's like we put on a uniform or something. And it doesn't really matter, and a lot of the time it's not kind of really ours. It's something that so a lot of the time we're operating out of what we think we should think, or what we think we should say, or what we think we should be. And the trouble, and the problem, and the two problems arise from that. One is, to some extent, that doesn't work for us. We don't really get that. So, and it doesn't quite work for people out there either, because they see that. They see that somehow, rather than getting me, they're getting some kind of system, something I put on, as it were. And I'm wondering, how can we get past that? And because it seems to me that if everything else is out of date, why is it that endless suggestions or pushes around, say, evangelism kind of fall so flat? Well, I know in my case, because I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. For a whole host of reasons I don't want to do it. I can justify them all day. But I don't want to do it. And it seems to me that we, that somehow this isn't just a kind of personal psychology thing, this putting on of this uniform. There's something about the church in many places and many times at the moment, which makes it difficult to get beyond that.
Isn't though part of the conversation we've been having so far that when you say you don't want to do it, what it has become in the minds of many people is something so toxic and unpleasant that it's much better than to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I kind of try and answer a bit?
Please.
So I used to, years ago, be, shall we say, an old school style evangelist. Altar calls, the lot, the whole, testimony thing, everything else. Like Sunday school, it was ridiculous. It's terrible. And as part of my own, I guess, journey along that would be me seeing people come forward for altar calls, and particularly, I guess, maybe relating to some of my testimony, them being in need of more ministry, whatever, healing, etc., more than the yes please me and coming up. As I've gone through discovering more about me and my gifts and my, and trying to figure out, so what's that about, God? What's that about? Being, again, a very, at that point, quite an old school evangelist. I began to discover that the more I am me, wherever I am, even if that hurts, I am a very working class person who swears quite a bit, who doesn't get what other people are saying, who never went to sixth form, who gets quite feisty and upset about stuff. The more I am me, and the more ouchier that almost is, the more people come to Christ. The better relationships I have. With people in and out of church, but more out. I don't give anybody a script. I know the scripts. I don't give anybody a script. I don't give anybody a 4-point plan or the cartoons of hell and flames and everything else that has been a part of my life. But I really liked your personhood. I've had several people within a fresh expression in recent years who I knew that my key was actually to just tell them that they could do something. My key was to say to a woman who'd made a birthday card and sat there and had 10 minutes to herself to make it, was to say, well done, girl, you know you could do it. That was all. I didn't have a magic plan. I didn't have anything else, because you know what? God was already there doing his stuff anyway. God was in our friendship, our relationship with each other. Now, of course, there's times where you're going to have to talk about God, because he does exist. And you're going to have to answer some really weird questions that you don't know the answer to. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I have no idea. There's nothing wrong in not having a clue yourself. You know that very well. And it does seriously seem that the more and more I am me, just really me, regardless of everybody kind of disapproving of me and rolling their eyes at me and me not fitting, it just seems that God just does his thing around me.
Thank you.
It's really beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. That is what I heard as well when I was talking to people that I interviewed for my research. And I think there's a really interesting article on conversion of people who've had a history of drug and alcohol abuse. And it talks about the sense of fragmentation that can occur when people begin to tell testimonies of their lives which are too black and white. And so what I would suggest is that we have I called it in my research an evangelical missional narrative, a kind of story about what happens. And it's a linear story, and it goes from all bad to all good. And a lot of what I do in my work is to encourage people to reflect on their own journeys of faith and say, well, you know, it was a bit messier than that, wasn't it? Like if you think back, you know, we use this kind of story format in quite a shorthand way, but life just is not like that. So for people who I was coming alongside who are practitioners in mission, they're seeking to reach out to the people. I'm like, so your expectations for the people that you're coming alongside are quite different from your own experience. Yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? So what if your expectation for them was a bit more similar to your own experience of God being at work in your life? And what if you were able to be honest about what that really was, rather than packaging it in a neat before and after story? How does that change things? And it makes mission a much more calm and truer process somehow. I don't mean in the sense, I suppose authenticity is the word that I'm reaching for. And it resonates with me with what you were saying, Keith, about putting on the system. I would
prepackaged thing.
Use
the language of life change versus fitting in. And often what people do when they come to faith in that linear system is that they fit in. They adopt a set of often middle class behaviours that they learn to do to be good and a Christian, and they fit in with that community. But that is they are often ill-fitting garments because it feels like I'm trying to be better than I am, and that's weird. So I feel already that there's some inauthenticity in that, and I'm not allowed to admit what I really am, or the lack of goodness inside me, and it's accompanied with some negative expectations, unrealistic expectations in that as well. So you're just primed really for it going Pete Tong a few years down the line, and when you're in middle class settings, everyone just pitches up on a Sunday and looks smart and just cries at the appropriate moment when someone plays a meaningful song. Do you know what I mean? You've got a pattern. You know, everyone's polished up, and you just have appropriate emotional outlets. But when you're in an urban setting, you can't do that. Do you know what I mean? Life's too messy. It's too complicated. Where there's too much, so you end up with all the mess on the outside, and the linearness breaks down. And I think that's the great gift for me, has been in confronting a setting where that polish up on a Sunday doesn't work, and realising that God is still there in huge love.
I think if we recognise that broken, messy rubbish in ourselves, and the stuff we don't know and we're not good at and everything else, then it's very, very easy to come alongside someone who's actually the same as you.
Yeah. The power difference has been levelled. Sorry, I've witted on this.
Jeremy.
Thank you. I think sometimes in my mind anyway, we think about the church and the communities, but actually my church it's much more complex than that, because you've got the religious professionals like me who are middle class, who come in professionally polished, trained, and then you've got the members of the congregation who are part of that community, who have lived there all their lives, and the asset-based stuff, in a way, is where it starts. It's got to be with our congregations, in terms of telling them, no, just because we're paid to do this stuff, we're not the ones with the answers. Because I think what, Sonia, I think you were saying, was actually my voice alongside somebody in Kirby. I'm very audibly and probably visibly not a Scouser, even though I've been there 14 years. And somebody else who can have a much more authentic voice telling a non-linear narrative, because they don't have simple conversion narratives like we're all supposed to, with a 1-minute lift testimony and everything else. So I think in a way is what the church hasn't been doing, is actually how do we get people to value their own ministry? To the extent where I've had people say to us, well, such and such a vicar used to go around the parish in his cassock and everybody knew he was part of the church. So if only you vicars would do that these days, that would be better, and that would get people back into church. There's a lot going on there when people are doing that. And actually it's how do we get, it's almost like the boundary, we kind of have this clear church community, but actually it's much messier than that. I'll shut up.
Can I just put what you said? I really liked what you said. Thank you. It really helped me to make some sense of the conversation. And I wanted to put it in my own experience, which is from a very middle class background, so it's very different. But nevertheless, my evangelical spirituality ran out when I was 38. I can almost name definitely in a year when it ran out. It just stopped having any life, energy, something. And I was faced with a choice then. Do I give up on this thing? Or do I look for something else deeper in the tradition that actually is life-giving? Now, I did find some stuff. Thankfully, I'm still here. But it was a really critical point. But my point is that what that journey from that point on helped me to do was to integrate the bits of my life, including the dark, nasty, sinful, rubbish stuff, that I think I'd been trying to kind of get rid of, rather than actually make part of me. And that relates to the spiritual tradition, which says that our task as human beings is to find our true self, the integrated self, which makes sense of all of us, which is what you were describing, I think, of this is me, this is how God made me. God's not going to judge me for how I was not more like, I don't know, Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King or Moses or whatever. God's going to judge me for how was I like Nigel should be, is, in Nigel's best self. And that's really helped me, I think, to see these questions as spiritual questions, because I think having a spiritual director was one of the things that really helped me through that transition from that really wasn't working through to what's emerged since, and that having another person in the room who, because I think before that I believed I could sort it out myself, and of course it then ran out. Whereas actually sitting together with another person and attending to the activity of God it's really tough. But it's the thing that's I think kept me within the church, even if I'm a little bit on the edge of the inside, as Richard Rohr says. Nevertheless, I think it's been the thing that's helped me to be me more than I may have done otherwise, or I may not have been anywhere near it.
But this conversation connects with I forget which one of you said something about an anxious church in an anxious society. Was that United?
Well, we're both of us. I think we agree on that one.
Yeah, but I can feel the lack of anxiety in the conversation that we're now having, and the freedom in just relaxing and being ourselves and having conversations with people and relationships and seeing what happens, and that is so not anxious, and so life-giving, and also so powerful. The movement in Philippians 2 that we started with is the giving away of power, and the way that then becomes powerful, and so just to be to let go of the facade and just be real and in relationship with people and see what happens is that movement of the giving away, and finding freedom and power in that.
Thank you. Lucy.
I think that there's a strand of belief. I don't know whether it's traditional or whether it keeps perpetuating, which I have come across a lot because I move around churches a lot. And it is that if you're a good Christian, these things won't happen to you. And so there is huge shame attached to failure. Failure in terms of, the things I've come across are having a baby outside of being married, of divorcing, of getting the first stages of dementia. This wouldn't happen to me. Cancer. All the really, really huge things, homelessness, all the prison, the really huge things that can happen, couldn't happen if I was a good Christian, so I must be a bad Christian and God doesn't love me. Really, this is so, it goes through our religion like Blackpool Rock. And I really worry about it because I think that early impressions of cause and effect, which work fine in parenting, don't work in religion, and yet they are in religion. You did this, so this is going to happen to you. And I've worked with girls in prison who are utterly convinced that God doesn't love them because they wouldn't be in prison. Not because there's some get-out clause that if they believed in God, they'd get out, but that they are worthless, useless individuals. And I think that that's a thing that needs unpicking over and over and over again.
Yeah, the sort of the gospel of social conservatism as against the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's something particularly English about some of that, where the English Christianity has been, particularly moralistic.
I experience it in the African churches too.
Okay.
And I wonder whether it's actually, I would agree with you, and I wonder whether it's part of a bigger picture in the wider world at the moment, in that I think failure is not tolerated anywhere in our society, in our workplaces, in the world of education, in parenting, in hospitals, in social media. Again, the pressure is to always present a happy, successful face.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether actually it's a wider picture as well.
But I wonder if that's where us being very real and vulnerable and all those things that are opposite to what
Yes,
the world
that's why
wants.
it's so important.
Yeah, is massively important, and also very authentic to the people who are sitting in front of us, sitting alongside us. They know what a Coca-Cola advert looks like. They don't want to see that.
Yeah, all right. I'm just wondering whether this conversation sort of brings us back to Anna's sort of concept of personhood, and whether, you know, if we really start there as the valuing, and, you know, where God starts from valuing us as people, whether that's perhaps then what, you know, the church or Christians can usefully bring. That's that concept of value, irrespective of what the world may say, or conventionally what the church may say about people's value. We were having a discussion earlier about personhood, and I kind of wanted to see if I could expand on it a little bit more, because I was wondering, you know, having worked a little bit with an asset-based approach, whether this concept of personhood almost takes us beyond an asset-based approach, because there is a danger in an asset-based approach that you're saying, well, you know, what can the community or individuals bring of their assets? What can they give? What can they do? But actually, personhood is taking us beyond to, well, just who are you? And your lovely idea of whatever you are, you make a dent on the world. And I know through the conversation we had talking about working with people with profound disabilities, you can still talk about personhood even if they can't actually do anything. I don't know whether perhaps you can, you know, reflect on that a bit more.
Yeah. Yes, I think that perhaps connecting a little bit to other thoughts that have been shared. Personhood is about significance, and the fact of someone's existence, the fact that their existence does make a dent in the world, whether they choose it or not. Actually, you make a dent in the world. It's interesting. It's one of the reasons why the language of power feels to me sometimes a bit unfamiliar, unnatural. One of the reasons probably I found it quite hard to prepare for today, because I didn't have a nice typology of power to bring to you. And the reason of that is because I do think, whilst I absolutely agree with Nigel that power is a neutral term in its essence and it's helpful to see it in that way, I think that so often we default in our minds to understandings of power as control or over ourselves or others, or power as invulnerability, in the kind of sense that you can be empowered and whatever your circumstances you will overcome, kind of thing. And I think personhood does take us to a place where we can accept who we are made to be with the gifts and the weaknesses of each of our individual selves, also accept the various gifts and brokennesses of our life circumstances that have brought to us, and life events that happen, serious illnesses, tragedies, things that do go on outside of our control. I think that personhood is about worth and value based simply that you exist as a human and that you are significant in that, which means that whatever happens in your life, you may not have power to change that situation. A situation may be outside of your control, but you are nonetheless significant within the context of that situation. The action that you take or don't take will make a difference. Your approach to it will make a dent. And yeah, I think for me that's how those things hold together. That we often align these ideas of power with invulnerability, and I do think it's cultural. I do think there is a sense in which we're, as a society, as a Western culture, and with all the countries that includes, we are not great at death, we're not great at illness, we're not great at any kind of lack, we're really not great at things being outside of our control, because we've done so well over the last couple of 100 years at fixing stuff. And Sam Wells talks about this, if you want to read more about this, a Nazareth Manifesto, he has a really helpful kind of way of explaining this actually, and getting to God being fixer. And therefore our expectations of our Christian lives as being a series of, okay, we're a bit rough around the edges when we start, but God gradually fixes us over time. Even that, is kind of called into question by so many of our life experiences, isn't it? We've all got stuff that God hasn't fixed, and why on earth not, if he's so good at it and so keen on it happening? We all have those questions, don't we, that we hold, that we get cross with him about sometimes. But maybe God's not primarily a fixer. Maybe that's something we've come up with over the last couple of 100 years.
I think we've forgotten the idea of, I think we move away constantly, particularly now. The fixer God is one that's very tempting. When actually the suffering God is where people could more easily connect.
I wonder if you know Francis Young's book about God's presence, because there's a really great chapter in there where she describes almost another second conversion through realising that her profoundly autistic son, who the questions that's raised, she's wrestled theologically with, she realises that actually God radically does not need her to believe in God around these questions. And that liberates her to actually believe in God. It's a really beautiful description of how her son has taught her something about God's, what we might call Apothea. God doesn't need to create the world. I mean, the world is created because God's overflowed God's self, because all that's in God can't be contained in God. And so that's how stuff happens. And that frees us from the need, the need to be needed, back to the charity thing. Yeah.
Bringing in together the ideas of sort of personhood and power, I think just a little practical thing that I'm finding myself doing at the moment in my role in church is actually giving people the authority to do the thing that God wants them to do. And there's a lot of, I've gone from a position on the PCC of finding who can we get to do this stuff that we want to do, to we've got these people, they care about stuff and they want to do it. And this came out of actually just spending an afternoon on a sofa having, a chat and hearing from my friend all of the things that are lacking in the community. And then, we've got a community on our doorstep. Because of various cuts this summer, if you have no money and no transport and children, there was nothing put on by any local services that was accessible. And she had her friends coming around and crying on her sofa because they didn't know what to do with their 4 kids in the summer. What are they going to do? And I said, well, look, we had a big long discussion about what the church should be doing, and she had lots of ideas about what the church ought to be doing. I said, right, Tracy, you're the church. We have a coffee morning coming up. Let's go and ask the ladies organising it. Can we do something for the children during the coffee morning? You can invite whoever you want. And, it was a little thing. It was one morning out of a whole summer. But she was so glad that I had given her the authority to go and do it.
So that's my point about the move from the private to the public. Instead of her going to do that as a private Christian individual.
Well, she couldn't.
Well, she couldn't because she didn't have the power to do it. But what you did was you gave her the public authority from the church council to say, this is your task. Go and do it.
Yeah,
now, that's a massive shift. That's a huge shift in the way that we understand how the church operates in the world. Because I've got the data. Churches hardly ever do that anywhere in the country. They don't act in public in the name of the church authorised by the church council. They just don't, because we've given in to the privatisation of religion and modernity.